We have Wen Qin. And so Wen is a data scientist at Microsoft, presenting how to run a trustworthy online controlled experiment and get insights. Wen, just a reminder to set your timer, like mine that just went off, and enjoy.
Oh, can I start now? It's not.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we can start. Hello, everyone. My name is Wen Qin. I'm from Microsoft. We're glad to give a talk here at Women in Data Science. Today, I want to talk about how to run a trustworthy online controlled experiment and get insights. So online controlled experiment is a common method to test your idea for a product, whether it's great or not. It is also known as A/B testing. When you run an experiment, you always have 3 steps. The first one is you develop your idea into the code. The second step is that you start an experiment. You have your change or new feature as a treatment, and you have your production as your control. You have this experiment showing the different experience to a bunch of users and run it for some time. And at last, the last step is to collect the data and make some analysis and select the better experiment and ship it to the product. You might see some exciting success based on your analysis, but before you celebrating that, you want to ask some questions to confirm it is true. For example, you want to ask whether you have any data quality issues, are your KPI metrics regressed, and so on. If there is any no's to these questions, your success might not be the real ones, and your experiment is not trustworthy. To solve the problem, my team just developed several experiment checklists based on the more than 10 years experience of focusing on A/B testing. Corresponding to the 3 steps I mentioned earlier, we can have 3 checklists. For the pre-experiment checklist, it focuses on the hypothesis and design. For the during experiment checklist, it helps you to monitor the data quality. And for the post-experiment checklist, you can understand the results and make shipping decision. And I will use 2 examples to help you to walk through the experiment checklists to see how to use them. So assume that you're a PM for this mobile app for that collaboration, and you have a great idea to change the icons of the entry bar. We will just walk through the checklist. Before you start the experiment, you have this pre-experiment checklist at hand. The first step is to define your hypothesis. There are several points you want to check. And as for your case, your hypothesis is that your new icons look so cool, and your change will improve the user engagement. And you pick up 2 success metrics, that is the percentage of users clicking the icons and the retention rates for all the users. You have the percentage active user as a key metric, which you don't want it to regress, which indicates that your product is hurt. And you target all the users because everyone can see this change when they open this app. After having this, you go to the second step. Because you target at all the users, this step does not apply here. We can skip it for now, and we will cover it with our second example. And the third step is to determine how you roll out your feature to your audience. Because you think that your impact is high, so you want to start with small traffic first to avoid messing up all the users if there is any issue. After that, you want to determine the duration and the traffic size for your experiment. You want to get enough traffic size to make sure that you have the enough metric power to detect small movements. As for the duration, you determine to use 2 weeks to avoid any weekly pattern. And as for the traffic size, with the power analysis, you know that 10% for treatment control is enough to detect only 1% metric movement. That meets your expectation, so you're good to go with this traffic size. After having all this, the last step is to implement all the needed metrics in your scorecard and make sure they are available, and you can review them after you collect all the results and make the decision later. So with all this, you're good to start your experiment. And the second phase, assume that you schedule several scorecards for your experiment. For example, you have the 1 day, 7 day, 14-day scorecards, and you want to walk through this during experiment checklist whenever there's any scorecard is ready. For example, if you have the 1 day scorecard available, you want to review it and follow the step 2 to 4 to understand the key metrics movements in your scorecard. The checkpoints include the data quality is good and the metric movements, you want to understand that. As for the data quality, here is a list of checkpoints. For example, the sample size is balanced between treatment control and the traffic size makes sense. Sorry. If you have only like 1/10 of the traffic size compared to your expected value, it indicates that your configuration is not correct. So you want to check whether your setup is correct or not. So after checking all these points, you see that, okay, your scorecard does not have any data quality issue. And you go to the next checkpoint, that is to understand the metric movement. Here is also a list of checkpoints. For example, the metric value makes sense. You don't have any 0 or negative values for your metrics. And you want to check the static movements for your metrics. With all these checkpoints, you found out that your success metric and your key metrics have a static improvement, which is a good sign. After having all this information, you go to the last step. That is to make the decision to continue or stop the experiment based on this scorecard. You want to stop it if you have any severe data quality issue or you have the negative impact. With all the previous information, you're confident that you're good to go to the next step. So you want to continue the experiment. So you want to repeat this process whenever a new scorecard is available, and you repeat it until your experiment is finished. And after your experiment is finished, you want to walk through the post-experiment checklist to understand your results and make a shipping decision. The first several steps are quite similar to the during experiment checklist. That is to make sure the data quality is good and understanding of the metric movements of all your metrics. And for your example, you see this several metrics improving static and including your success metric, your key metrics, and other supporting metrics. And the next step is to explain your movements by your hypothesis. So all these movements seems to support that your feature improves the user engagement. That is very good. And finally, you go to the last checkpoint, that is to make a shipping decision. So based on all the previous information, you're very confident that your feature is good and you want to ship it to your product. So we just walk through the checklist by this example, but we missed several steps about the trigger analysis. So the next, I will just walk through another example to cover these missing steps. Assume you have another idea that is not the UI change, but the backend change to improve the meeting quality. So you target at users who only use meetings. That is only 10% of all the users. There is an issue that is your metric movement will be diluted because your feature coverage is low. If you have 1% increase of the meeting length metric for the target users, you can only see 0.1% increase with the standard scorecard for all users, because 90% of users do not use meetings at all, and they cannot impact the metric movement at all. To fix this problem, you want to use the trigger analysis. The trigger analysis is to drill down to the target users only and select the data for them. When you make the analysis, you want to understand the movements for these target users only. We recommend you to use the trigger analysis if the feature coverage is below 70%, where the dilution might be an issue. So with the trigger analysis, during the experiment and post-experiment, you want to review the trigger analysis scorecard in addition to the standard scorecard. And you want to check whether there's any inconsistency between the trigger and standard analysis. So if you have some improvement for your trigger analysis, but have some regression with your standard one, you need to understand why there's a difference. A likely reason is that you have the incorrect trigger condition to have your trigger analysis. A common data quality issue for the trigger analysis is the imbalanced sample size. We always call it SRM, standing for the sample ratio mismatch. So going back to your example, I just showed the distribution of number of meetings of the user for treatment control. The white bars here stand for the users who never use meetings successfully, and they will be excluded from the trigger analysis. As your feature improves the meeting quality, so the crash rate drops, and you will have more users using meetings successfully. So in your trigger analysis, you will include more users in the treatment compared to control. And there is an issue, that is the user base is totally different between treatment and control, and your metric movement is not valid anymore. For example, you will see number of chats per user decreasing because you introduce more light users to the treatment, but may not because your feature just hurts the product. So to resolve this issue, you might want to use other trigger conditions with balanced sample size. An example is that you can use users who use meetings before the experiment, and that is not impacted by the feature you introduce. And that case, you will have the balance of user between treatment control for the trigger analysis. So to sum up, we just walk through the experiment checklist, which helps you to make the experiment trustworthy. And we have 3 different checklists corresponding to the different phases of the experiments. And pre-experiment checklist focuses on the hypothesis and design. And during experiment checklist helps you to monitor the quality of the analysis. And post-experiment checklist helped to make the shipping decision. And you want to use trigger analysis if the feature coverage is very low. And you need to pay attention to the imbalanced sample size because it will invalidate your results. Thank you very much for listening to this talk. And if you want to learn more details about the checklist, you can reach out to me and I will send you like the full list for version of the checklist. Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wen. And we'll transfer over to Q&A. Mm-hmm. There looks like there are a couple questions in there, so I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay. I see 3 questions here. The first one is that how do you, sorry, just appeared another one. What are the factors you consider to make a decision whether you can have to abort when an issue is discovered? So, yeah. So if there is any severe data quality issues, it means that your analysis might have some problem. So it depends. You need to understand what kind of reason for your issue. For example, it's only a like the scorecard issue. You can just continue the experiment, but fixing like the pipeline issue, and then you still have the valid results. In this case, you can continue the experiment. But if it happens to your raw data, for example, you just miss some like telemetry, you might stop it and fix the issue, and then start the experiment again to collect enough telemetry. So it just depends on different cases for you. I would say that if you can continue the experiment and fix the problem, and you still have the valid results, you can keep it going. Otherwise, you need to stop it and iterate on that. Okay. And another one, How do you balance what I assume here, the needs of making changes that won't poke risk for you, your experiment? Sorry, this question is a little bit long. I can answer offline maybe and ask for some clarification later. We can go to the next one. What is the downside of using trigger analysis if it's above 70%? So there's no downside of having the trigger analysis. We recommend you to use the trigger analysis below when the coverage is below 70% because the dilution will be severe in this case. But if your coverage is above 70% and below 100%, you can still use the trigger analysis because you just drill down to the target users and it will give you like much cleaner results. So whenever you have the ability to trigger the analysis, you'd better do that. Do we still have time to answer the questions or do I need to answer?
Yeah, let's do about 3 more minutes.
Okay. During checkpoint analysis, do you look at the entire experiment as a whole or can you look at daily anomalies? Yes, so as for actually, when you analyze the results finally, you want to take a look at the overall results as well as the daily anomalies. So if you see like if there's one day you have some like different results, you want to understand whether there's any issue with that day, and you will also want to check whether there's any trend. For example, you have like a big movements at the very beginning of the experiment, but it's just a decay as the experiment runs. So it might indicate that you have some novelty effect. So when you make the decision, you want to take a look at both the overall and the individual scorecard for daily. Are you controlling for doing multiple assessment of p-values over the course of the experiment? I don't quite get it. Or can we unmute the attendees to make the clarification? Or
yeah, let me see. There you go. Okay.
Yeah. We only have the so normally we have the 0.05 as the p-value to identify the static movements, but usually it can be the false positive. To fix that issue, we don't use like the family-wise errors or something. We just have like a lower p-value to identify whether there's a highly stacked movement. For example, we use the 0.01 as another threshold to cut for the highly static movements. And if we have that one, we are more confident that the movement is true. But if it's just between the 0.05 or 0.01, we think that is a marginal one, and it might be the false positive. You need to look for some supporting metrics to support that. Otherwise, we just think that it's not strong enough to support your decision. So can I answer the last question offline because it's a little bit long?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So if you want to connect with Arya after, that's fine.
Okay.
So thank you, Wen, for a great talk. We're just going to take about a 5-minute break and we'll get to Melissa's